We're here again for another episode of Mastering Change. What if the body could speak and tell the story of trauma left behind? In this episode, I'm joined by Dr. Tian Dayton, a pioneer in using psychodrama as a trauma-informed tool. We talk about how giving voice to parts of the body can help clients express what words can't, and how psychodrama, when used gently and with care, can support connection and repair. Tian shares how she's adapted psychodrama specifically for working with addiction and trauma, and explains how stepping into different roles can help clients process emotional pain and reconnect with parts of themselves that have been left behind. Here's Dr. Tian. Tian Dayton, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, Tian. Welcome.
And-
As most of our listeners already know, we start all of these podcasts with a little card game. So I've selected a number of cards here. On each of these cards, there is a prompt. And the idea is that that prompt leads into a short story, a little narrative that will help you connect to our audience and our audience connect to you. So without further ado, I will pick the first card, and it says, "The last time I let my anger get the better of me, ...
Oh, that's easy. I can't go too public with this. I was in a situation, I can't give public personal details, and I had been harboring something that related to a family member and a child who was, I thought, mishandled. And I saw the person who did the mishandling did it over time. I've lived with the fallout of it, and I just walked up and told him I thought he mishandled it horribly. But that had repercussions, not so much for me, because I said what I wanted to say, but I wasn't considering enough the others it would affect. So that was my moment of kind of that fury taking over my thorough thinking.
It happens, doesn't it? I think that's the thing about anger. I think when we see something that really enrages us, I don't think sometimes, quite often, it's quite difficult to kind of play the story forward or see it from other people's perspectives. It's just in the immediacy that you've got to do something about it. But
actually, I was seeing it that, as you say that, from other people's perspectives, but I, in my tattered brain, thought I was defending. That's how it felt to me. And because classic cognitive distortion, I felt it so strongly, I felt I was right. And I carried a sense of righteousness, which is not to say there's not righteousness in it, but it made me think I was right about doing something that I was not right about doing.
Those moments of anger often come from deep feeling and that kind of empathy and compassion that was coming out for that person that was on the receiving end of that. It's the thing that often creates the distortion. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Okay, so if I can ask you, Tian, please, could you introduce yourself to our audience and in your own words, just a short introduction to your work?
My name is Tian Dayton. I'm a clinical psychologist and a fully certified psychodramatist in psychodrama, sociometry, group psychotherapy. I was in my past a Montessori teacher. I've had a master's in creative arts therapy. So my focus has been working in the addictions field. I came in because my father is an alcoholic and I needed to heal. And when I discovered psychodrama as a modality that was helping me heal, my path fell in front of me, and I understood what my mission was. So I've been trained in psychodrama before I even knew I was doing psychodrama. And then I was fortunate in being in New York City, where I trained with the Moreno's wife and other excellent psychodramatists. And it has been my life to adapt psychodrama to needs in the addiction field and the trauma field. And I'm a senior fellow at the Meadows, so the work of Bessel van der Kolk, Peter Levine, Steve Porges, Dick Schwartz, we've all gotten to know each other, and I've incorporated their work for 30 years. Bessel's work for the longest, and then more recently, other work. So then I do a neuropsych-informed version of psychodrama and sociometrics, RTR sociometrics.
So let's start there, because many of our audience might be familiar in some way, shape, or form with the concept of psychodrama, but I'm almost certain that some won't. So can we start with how you describe it, how it manifests and unfolds, and some of the benefits of that approach versus other modalities and approaches?
I fell into the field because of, I like to say we all enter in on our, like a Parker House rule. We back into the field of addictions. We come because we need this. And the kind of recovery you encounter in the addictions field is deep. When it's 12-step, it becomes a life pattern. So the way I work is very compatible with these principles. I have developed, I'll start with what I developed because of it's so present for me why I did that. In the addictions field, we were using psychodrama, and it was healing, healing, healing. But it was also out of control. And that concerned me a lot. The therapist may or may not have had good training, but over the years, and being a trainer myself, I've come to the conclusion that even good training does not make it trauma-informed psychodrama. What Moreno used to say is, I get them in the door, essentially, with psychodrama. I heal them with sociometry. So in my deep desire to solve the problems of the people I was training, those who were doing frontline addictions treatment, who were not going to get the level of training that I so enjoyed getting and was privileged to get, but who were nonetheless doing frontline beautiful work. So I wanted to give them the hardware, the technology that was safe. And I leaned into sociometrics because I know that is present-oriented, and sociometrics are safer. They're more structured. When Steve Porges looked at Florchek's work, which are my contribution to sociometrics, he immediately understood. And I was describing to him, I wanted to make the role of the therapist less and the role of connect clients member to member more. The client became important, the therapist less. So that dealt with the lack of training. And he said, you created a new form of therapy, and this is your healing through co-regulation. Understanding immediately what this method or Florcheks have in common with human beings, with animals who group together, with the mammalian response to trauma. So how does that look when we treat trauma? A loss of connection with the self. In trauma, we freeze feelings, we shut down our thinking. So we really lose a connection with our inner world. I mean, we can go for decades feeling empty inside because we cannot call up the feelings that we experience over many things. And we also lose a trust in connecting with others, a sense of safety in connecting with others. Deb Dana and Steve Porges have done wonderful nervous system work around this. And that I would say I see as ground zero for getting your dysregulated system regulated and taking charge of your own nervous system and your experience of how comfortably you can connect, both with yourself and others. But what I need in treating people is a way to also address their history. So I need to do both. I need to give them the experience of connecting with themselves in the moment, uh, feeling feelings that have been shut down, naming them, feeling comfortable enough to share them, held by the group, and then listening as other people share, because that's another capacity we lose in trauma, which is why couples can't listen to each other, why people can't listen to each other without exploding, leaving the room, shutting down. Floor checks accomplish all that. The Moreno sociometrics were not involved enough. Floor checks are psychoeducational. Yeah, Minta?
I was just going to say, can you maybe explain to the audience what are floor checks? I know what they are when I'm cleaning
Yes.
the room. I know how
Yes.
that's what happens, but I think some people might not know what that means.
I don't.
If I could, can I mention a website so people can actually look at? If you go to tiandayton.com and look at the top, and I think it says RTR Sociometrics in the nav bar, if you click on that, you will see what floor checks look like. But if I describe them, I will describe why I started them, which will describe them. My trainee in the early 80s came to the training group, white as a sheet. He had gone from getting 8 clients and he having a healing sessions with them to 35. And he was ready to leave the field. He was overwhelmed. How do I help 35 people? I am one person. And as I went home, I thought, as a sociometrist, I should be able to figure that out because our job is to connect people with people. So I came in the next session with feelings scrawled on pieces of paper, because what do we relapse over? Feelings that we can't process. I put them on the floor, maybe between, I don't remember that day, 10, you could have more, 16, and just invited the group to here's the key, get out of your chairs, move towards, make a choice. Out of your chairs means you're in movement. It means you're not glued to the frozen position. Making a choice means you are already doing trauma healing, which shuts down our ability to choose. I mean, we start to become choiceless in psychodrama. We start to feel powerless. We feel helpless. So those acts in and of themselves begin a healing process. Now choose the feeling you're feeling in this moment. And share a couple of sentences about why you chose that feeling. So that allows people in the safety of a group to connect with that feeling, to translate it into words so they can think about it and reflect on it. It becomes an abstraction. They can use their prefrontal cortex to right size, to regulate the emotion through understanding it better. And then they listen as other people do the same, which means they feel less alone. They develop the skill of hearing. Then that's the structure. Then, okay, enough of that feeling. Now walk over to a feeling you avoid feeling. Well, that is a beginning trauma work without ever using the word trauma, because we avoid feeling what we can't process or feel safe feeling. But I'm not using the word trauma because people get nervous and scared. That happens in the field. We're going to work on your trauma, and immediately people are shutting down, and there it goes. So they start to say, I avoid feeling, I don't like it when I feel excited. I mean, a variety of things. Because in my home, when I'd get excited, it would just end up being to be so disappointing when what I was excited about wouldn't happen again. Or I don't like feeling anxious because it's a rabbit hole feeling for me. I go off into other feelings. I start swimming in a bunch of feelings. So this articulation is, of course, in itself healing. And that process is structured. So the brain likes structure. It wants a beginning, a middle, and an end. So all of it is built into this simple process. Now, if I am there and I have more psychodrama training, I might do role plays from that. Or I might use the timelines in my model and do role plays and invite people to first write out their attachment trauma, At what age did you experience something that you felt shut you down, or you feel you still have workaround? That's focused, right? You can't ask people to tell you about their trauma because the words aren't there. The thinking was shut down at the time of the frightening experience. So you need to get at it in some sort of a bottom-up way. Floor checks are bottom up. Your feet take you there. We're asking, it's a slow movement. Uh, Timelines are bottom up. You draw them and then you share them and you go on them and stand near people who are at the same age feeling blocked, and you talk with them. So the babies talk to the babies and the toddlers talk to the toddlers, the adolescents. In the room, in all of these exercises, starts to take on a bubbly atmosphere. And when I try to give the next prompt, I know it's working when people just ignore me. And then I'll give one, and they just will. You just see a whole lot of heads go like that, and they just listen a little harder, and they don't want me interrupting their experience of co-regulation because it feels so good. It feels so good. Psychodrama feels so good. If it's a timeline, you're talking to yourself at a certain age. So it's a part of yourself. You're talking to the 7-year-old, and you're reversing roles. All of this research on perspective taking, it's all built into this simple role play. Reverse roles. Stand in your 7-year-old and talk back to yourself as an adult. So that's using a timeline to start to build a connection between the wounded self and the adult self. Because what happens when you're traumatized, you talk from the wound, and then you get so sad when people don't want to hear you. People need to let the inner self that's wounded talk to the adult self, and let the adult self listen and try to right size that feeling and put it into words that don't alienate everybody around you, right? And get to that stage where I couldn't get to, of think of the other person. I'm going to say something, and if I want to get what I'm asking for, I need to be able to consider both of us. Good boundaries can't just obliterate other people. I can get to the psychodrama next whenever you want.
Yeah, go to a psychodrama, and then I'll give my input, because obviously I've been in your sessions, and I just want to also, I guess, share how powerful they've been from an observer perspective as well.
Okay, so the sociometrics are the first type. I won't name them specifically. You can see them on a website, but that's the basic idea. They're group processes by and large. They can be done virtually. I do them virtually all the time. There are a lot, and they can be adapted. That's very important to any population. And they're responsive to the population they're working with because that's who's in the room. Now, trauma-informed psychodrama, that's my other big learning and big passion that I want to do more writing about, and more training around. That is really the intersection of neuroscience and the theory of neuroscience and the hardware of psychodrama. We have a lot of theory, but we're short on hardware. Psychodrama is heavy on hardware and has less theory, so it can be very adaptable. It needs theory. What I think makes psychodrama trauma-informed is to keep it simple, to look for engagement, and to read the body. And that is not often done in psychodrama. That is Peter Levine territory. And so I've integrated Peter's work into the role play and we've had conversations about how each of us do this. He uses role play sometimes. All of these methods. Dick is using role play now. I'm very happy to have parts be part of the work I do. Talk to that part of you. People are in that language now, And Bessel, of course, the body keeps the score. And I love psychodrama understands the power of this form of healing. But here's what I think it has to be in order to be trauma-informed. You have to involve movement. You have to be going back and forth so the body can really be involved. Have to is a strong word. It's best to involve movement. Remember, we talk about the helplessness that accompanies trauma. Feelings are stored in the body. That's what Bessel's work, the thinking mind shutting down at a moment of terror, and the limbic system going into high rev. So the limbic system store is responsible for processing sense impressions and emotions. What this means is that we are gathering the sights and the sounds and the textures and the smells of the experience, but we're not making sense of it. We're in sort of a limbic tunnel, but our thinking mind isn't making meaning out of the experience or even sense of what's happening. So it lives in the body without a storyline. And that's why when it gets triggered by a memory, by a song, by a smell, by whatever, all the feeling and the sense impressions come shooting up. And people don't know why they're so angry. So they look at the person who made them angry and boy, did you make me angry, without any understanding of how their history is playing out in their present. And this is how we pass it down intergenerationally without knowing we're doing it. So all of this needs to be taken into account in doing psychodrama. If, for example, you're doing a role play talking to someone's mother, imagine you're talking to your mother. You may talk to her as a child. You may talk from the 7-year-old self to the mother you had then. That's really what I find useful, because oftentimes people work out a different relationship as adults and they don't want to tell on their parents who maybe were addicts or stressed, or they become nicer people as they got older. As Bill Cosby said, they want to get into heaven, so they become suddenly. But we're living with the distortion or the pain of the parent we had then. So that's what we're playing, and that's what you can put on stage in a psychodrama. So if you are talking, either as from me, Tian, today to my mother, it will go into history no matter what, because all of that history is in me. Or you can be deliberate in having the permission to talk from that younger self. What you can depend on as a director is the power of the gravity of that role play. What inexperienced directors do is try to tell people what to feel and get the thing moving and get people to cry so they don't feel insecure and untrained. What a more masterful approach is keep the talking to a minimum. Don't interpret, and don't ask too many questions. Don't do things that put people in their heads, and don't do push things. Use the technology, the simple technology that Moreno gave us. Use the stage. The stage, meaning we use space as part of the healing principle. If somebody feels far away, say, where does your mother feel in comparison to you? Some people will say she's on my head. Some people will say she's way over there. So put her there. What do you want to say? Something will come forward. If nothing comes forward, they're saying a lot. Watch the body, watch the posture, see where the body will tell you what needs to happen. Because if somebody's tightening up often in here, if their legs are going, if they're choking up in here, the tears are trying to work their way out. So you don't have to push for a catharsis. You can just say, what I notice, this is something in here. I try to be kind of vague so I don't tell people. But I noticed something in here. If you could put your hand there, if that part of you had a voice, what would it say? What would this part of you? That's a more direct line. And what happens is it moves the feeling up. And people start to articulate and feel safe in giving the part of the body a voice because they don't have to think of it. They don't have to think of it. If that part of you want to make a sound, what would it be? I mean, it can be all kinds of sounds. And then once you've trusted this connection, it doesn't have to start with the body. I mean, you can go back and forth a couple times before the body enters in, but then reverse roles. So you trust that too, right? Because reversing roles and then standing in the role of the mother and talking back to the self is so much is happening in the psyche of the protagonist at this time that directors or role players who get too wordy interfere with the protagonist's warm-up. This is all about what's going on inside the protagonist. Anything that interferes with the protagonist's warm-up feels like a cruelty to me on stage because it's gold when you can get to this hidden stuff. And if you are the protagonist, what you want is if the protagonist has a voice, it's saying, leave me here. I'm seeing what I haven't been able to see. I'm feeling stuff I haven't felt in years. Leave me here. Stop asking me questions. Stop interrupting. Don't ask me to pick a color or put a scarf on this. Just let me be here. Let me be alive again. And that's what a director ought to be sensitive to hear that cry, that silent scream, and allow then the time, the space, and the support. Let the protagonist know you are there with them just by your presence. And let this conversation continue. The role reversal will help the protagonist get unstuck from frozen feelings. The role reversal will allow the protagonist to take on the role of the mother. That's very empathy building. What I often do with protagonists as they're in role reversal, say as a mother, is if I think the time is right, may I ask you a couple of questions? And, somebody will turn the mother and go, okay, because they're in role, right? And I said, why do you think your daughter or your son brought you here today? So I'm interviewing the way you're interviewing me, right? But I'm interviewing the protagonist. We're going to find out history, how the mother sees the child and how the child sees the mother. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know why you would ask me. You never know what you're going to get, but go with what you get. So a role reversal interview can be very revealing, and a protagonist can use it to call out a parent. Sometimes they just want to show you what they experienced. It can feel very relieving. Sometimes they can they're doubling in psychodrama, something to be careful with. Both my friends Bessel and Dick Schwartz are, pointing that out, and I agree. Something I am careful with. I ask permission, the way you will see Dick masterfully ask parts permission. So I find the safest thing is either to double very carefully for the protagonist or the protagonist in role reversal. In other words, speak the inner life if that's going to move it forward, or ask them to double for themselves. That's the safest. Can you stand behind yourself and articulate what's going on the inside that you're just not able to say from the role? And people sort of know what that is. And any of those techniques, I rely on the techniques to move the process forward. Nothing brilliant that's going through my mind, because I try to have as little as possible going through my mind. I'm in Zen mind. I'm in open mind when I direct, because there's nowhere else to be. Otherwise, you'll land on top of the protagonist. The problem I have with lack of experience directors is that they go in with a plan, and then they get disappointed and upset when the protagonist doesn't do their plan, and then they tell them to do their plan. So everybody feels like they failed, right? Simple goals, less is more in psychodrama. So I think that's the architecture of what I do.
It sounds like there's a big need for improvisation, or to be comfortable in an improvisation context for you as the person directing that, because you can't be too scripted. There isn't like a clear beginning, middle, or end. I mean, there might be is there some hallmarks that guide through a session, but from what you're describing, you are working with what's presented to you, as opposed to...
I mean, from my experience of watching this happen, is that, and Tian, you can obviously tell me if that's wrong, but there are, I don't know if there are hallmarks, but there is an arc. There is it moves, and you come to an end, and when you come to an end, and mainly because everyone in the room is crying often, or something like that is happening. But, there is definitely a kind of process and a journey that you go on.
What is the moment of the kind of healing part? Is it because you were describing, is it the being able to... Is it about empathy and compassion? Is it about recognizing emotions that have been suppressed? Is it all of these things? In what part of that modality, what that approach is surfacing and processing the traumatic experiences that have created a negative imprint?
I don't think of it as traumatic experiences and events that create a negative imprint. I think of it as how the body responds to life. And if you understand how the body is responding and the frozenness that exists within someone when we're scared, a lot of people can go through very frightening things and not be traumatized. And some people go through very little and they're very traumatized. It is in how, and that can't be quantified, right? You have to know a history and a person extraordinarily well. And most of us don't even know ourselves that well. So what you need is, there is, like Picasso, when somebody said, what is art? And he said, what is not? I would say, what is healing? What is not? Everything I have described this morning is part of the healing, the connecting with the self, the connecting with the other, the feelings, naming them, letting them come out through the body, articulating them, connecting, describing them, listening. Then the history, it comes forward, as Minta was suggesting. If I depend on the protagonist, I let the protagonist, all positions in psychodrama, the director is meant to listen and follow and let the protagonist lead the way. That's our job. They know when to start and stop. They know what is in their heart to say. It is not my business to know that. I couldn't possibly know that. They barely know it. That's what healing is all about. That's what trauma healing is about.
Sometimes when it doesn't work so well is when the protagonist comes with a plan too. And I've seen that happen as well, is when they've done this before, and they want to come back in and they want to do it again. And that then...
Exactly.
Thing.
Well, when I started this one thing, Minta, in response to that, and Emma, I started getting interested in trauma through Bessel's work in the early 80s. And I began, anyway, I was incorporating into my work for many years. I thought one of his symptoms was desire to self-medicate. Sort of like, duh, here we are. Bingo. This is the whole key to unlocking a certain part of addiction. Why do people, who wants to obliterate their mind unless they're trying to run away from something, some feeling? I mean, some, you can talk about some drugs as being a spiritual experience and awakening and so forth. I think that's all very real. But to want to be drunk all the time or to high all the time, that's a different story. Okay, so I thought someone should write a book on trauma and addiction. I thought just it's not me. 10 years later, no one had. I just thought, well, okay, I'll take a stab at it. I wrote a book on trauma and addiction. Suddenly, all these conferences were starting to be named trauma and addiction. And I wanted to make that connection for the field formally. And I wrote maybe another book with trauma in the title, but I didn't see myself as an expert, right? I never see, I saw myself as learning. And I forgot that I'd written I write them and I kind of forget. So for about a year, I'd been on the road for many years by now and had no trouble doing the psychodrama that came up that people brought. Suddenly for about a year, it was like everybody froze. And I thought, oh, am I losing my touch here or what's going on? People are freezing and then I'm jumping around like a monkey, doubling, trying to use every technique. And out of desperation, it was in Las Vegas. I thought, oh, I can't. What if this happens like again? And I looked at this group and I said, just do a social atom of a moment in your life when you froze, when you just froze. And I saw 200 heads go like this. Everybody knew it. And it changed all of the work I was doing trauma-wise, because once people owned their own frozenness, that's what they brought to the stage. So to your point, Minta, it took away that self-consciousness or that desire to have the same experience, which, you cannot step twice into the same river. In psychodrama, it's really true of. And they brought they then looked at me as an ally. Let's together get underneath my frozenness. And then we could work from there. And suddenly the problem was erased. So I often do frozen moment work during treatment.
Why do you think they were suddenly all freezing though when you were doing the work for that period of the year? Do you think that it was just the self-consciousness of having to be, I think.
Well, it's because they thought they were doing trauma work with this trauma expert and she would heal them. And of course, I'm never coming from that place in my mind. I'm coming from the.
And that's what you said at the beginning as well, like trauma isn't, you never even mentioned the word trauma. It's not about it.
Because people, the minute they think they're doing their trauma work, they start thinking, what's the worst thing that ever happened to me? Oh, and that's not how you resolve trauma. You resolve it incrementally. You also resolve it by, I'm also, when I have people in group, I'm very supportive of their interests. If somebody find a hiking group, you love to paint, get into the flow state. You like to write, journal, whatever, find friends, walk with a friend, walk in the sunlight, walk in nature. I've been building that into my recovery programs for 30 years. The research has all been there. We just didn't talk about it till recently.
Which is crazy, isn't it, really? I mean, it's the most simple sort of interventions are the most simple ones that have been around. Not even the research has been around for years, but the interventions or things to do have been around. Well, they've just always existed. People have been doing them for, centuries, moving and yeah.
Bessel talks about that, and I'm Greek, so I'm very well aware of what dance, celebration, eating together, all of these. Greeks have had traditionally a very low crime rate because everybody knows everybody. Their families stay connected, and they're just we're all in each other's business, which is maybe a little over the top, but people stay connected. They stay responsible to each other.
I was going to ask that this sounds like such a profound and scalable and accessible tool. The key to it being great direction. And I'm just wondering, at the start of the conversation, you talked about the fact that, you felt very fortunate and grateful and for the privilege of great training. How do you see that possibility of that next? How do you take what you know, what you can do, how you can hold people, all of that learning, all of that iteration that's happened, and equip others or find a way to scale that? I mean, I've got a few thoughts on that, especially, based on what you said about the difference from the software to the hardware around actually technology and its role. But I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are. Where's the lowest hanging fruit for creating scale from what you know?
The lowest hanging fruit is the floor check. And I came to it out of desperation because I had to give people without a lot of training a way to incorporate this incredibly powerful form of healing into their work, but keep it safe. Start with floor checks, start with sociometrics, and then if you can get more role play training, add psychodrama. If you can't, the floor check is quite sufficient to provide the kind of healing experience we're talking about. I do experiential letter writing because if you're not trained in role play, it allows enough of that role moment because you can say, read your letter to an empty chair, who's sitting in the chair. Then you can reverse roles too if you want to, but it's shaped. So the level of training is less overwhelming. Even psychodramatists who have a lot of training can miss on how they organize psychodramas because whether their level of recovery, their level of understanding what they're working with in trauma, there are a lot of ways to go sideways. That's why I created RTR. Now, about 20 years ago, when sexual addiction came onto the scene, maybe it's even longer now. Everything seems like it's 20 years ago, but I had a lot of people in my groups suddenly coming forward with, I realized what they were getting up to in the night, alone at night. So I thought, what if I could create something virtual so they wouldn't go into these chat rooms and get in so much trouble or log on to porn? What if there was something else? So I did create a Emotion Explorer. It's at the bottom of my website, tiandayton.com, and you can find a feeling. It's all programmed. If you go on it and you find a feeling and you work through all the various stages, you will come out having processed not insignificantly when you're finished. I've been so very busy in my career that I didn't take it to the next place, but I am now going to put it into an app. What I'm doing now today is going a little crazy. I don't know every day something new comes around to train somebody in something new, or there's a new population, their coaches who need training, or the clinicians. I mean, every day there are new opportunities and needs. So what I have been doing, and here was the other thing, I'm sorry to admit, but people started stealing my stuff and putting it in their models. And, I don't mind. Use everything. Use it for free. I'm not looking to make money on any of this. But I want to be understood as a person who created floor checks, right? And I want to be understood as someone who can train people to do them. And when people take the timeline or the floor check or whatever and put it in their model and act as if they have created it, that bothered me. So I started to trademark things. Otherwise, I never would have bothered. And then the model came because, truthfully, Safe Harbor 20 years ago, Vilma Mangan asked me to She built a little treatment center, developed one for me to do trauma work because she found me helpful. She wanted to give it to her clients. And she wanted me to come out 4 to 5 times a year, and I just couldn't. I'm in New York, that's California. So I used in my mind an ATM machine, and I thought, how can I keep paring down the extra, pulling it out, pulling it out, pulling it out, and make this easy like an ATM machine, because they had just come out as easy to use compared to waiting in line. That I've been developing over 30 years, right? All of these things. Suddenly, the world is very, my field was interested from the beginning. Now there's interest everywhere because people are aware of trauma in a different way. Bessel's book is on the New York Times bestseller list for so long. And Gabor's books, Dick's, just so many beautiful things. Steve Porges's nervous system, people's awareness now they're looking to use embodied work. Now they want to know about bottom-up therapy. Well, I'm a good person to ask because I've been doing it exclusively my whole career. And so I feel called on, passionate about, do it constantly, just codify all of this, develop it, train people in it, and film it while I can still hear and see, and you know what I mean, before I drop off the planet, get all of this codified and filmed and as many people trained as I can.
But I also think, TM, the sociometric stuff and the floor checks, especially more the floor checks than anything, they can be used in schools, they can be used, all over the place. Because even at home with your kids, I was just thinking, we could do that. I could put those down for Rory and ask him to choose a feeling or, make it as a game almost. They play Twister, they could play floor checks, that kind
I've
of.
got that. I've just been designing it this last week.
Great.
I'll send it to you if you like. I mean, I'll send it to you, Minta. But games in the home, games in business. This is yesterday's conversation, connecting with somebody with business. This is what I'm doing. As you're saying this is what my life is every day these days. That and finishing this book and just training people and adapting. I'm now adapting for coaches. I was very reticent to do that, but I'm changing it and sticking with sociometrics. These things are safe. So I've got levels of a certificate. I mean, there's a coach level, a peer counselor level for, as you say, business, even in school use. Then there's a level 1 clinical, level 2 clinical, so that I'm dividing it so that it's safe, but it has felt like a heavy load to carry wisely and, what do you want to call it? Judiciously, prudently. But I'm fine there. I'm there like as of this morning. You know what I mean? This isn't a live thing.
And this is why I think this is where I remain optimistic about what artificial intelligence can do for us in that context, because you have all of the software to feed into the hardware and to shape that in a way that looks after the integrity of what you've created.
I'm
So
ready
for me,
if you know the person in AA, I'm ready to partner.
I'm going to ask you the question that we ask all of our podcast guests by way of wrapping up, but I can absolutely imagine that we might want a part 2 at some point in the future.
Wonderful.
So we live in a world of exaggerated fear and anxiety and doubt. If you zoom right out and look at the macro picture, the geopolitical landscape, climate crisis, come into societal levels and how society is broken down and things have changed so vastly in the last 50 years that we're almost living on Mars, come down to communities and the demise of community by virtue of how we work and how we show up. Sorry, coming again to our kind of...
I'm feeling it in my body as you say it.
I'm sorry, me too. And I'd say this every time. So we're coming down to kind of communities and then family and then colleagues and then relationship with significant other, children, and then our relationship with ourselves. There's lots of, fraught, fractious kind of reasons for that people are disconnecting and feeling that very emotionally, rationally, physically. if there was a single lever for change, a button that you could push that would be the catalyst, the kind of change that we need to see against that backdrop, what would it be?
I am the lever for change. You are the lever for change. You are the lever for change. We are the levers for change. We have to be the change we want to see. That's what Gandhi said. It's the only. We have to be the change we want to see. We have to be the people. Be the change we want to see.
Percent. Totally
Great.
agree.
Thank you, Tian. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Lovely pleasure.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for the privilege of being with you this morning.